The spaceport buzzed with life. Shining ships landed and took off like giant metal birds, while hundreds of beings from across the galaxy hurried through the walkways. Ryan adjusted the strap of his travel bag and kept his head low. Even after all these years, he preferred not to attract attention on distant planets like Virilia. Ryan wasn't here for fun. He was following a trail, a contract gone cold months ago. And something about this planet kept pulling at him. A strange feeling in his chest, like he had forgotten something important, nagged at him. But he pushed it aside. He had a job to do. He walked into the marketplace, where stalls of alien food, sparkling crystals, and colorful fabrics filled the air with wild scents. Voices of traders called out in strange languages. Ryan kept moving, his boots crunching lightly on the dust-covered ground. That's when he saw her. Standing across the marketplace was a woman unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered with a soft, pale glow, almost silver blue under the sunlight. Her hair fell in silky waves, and small, delicate ears peeked from under it. She was dressed in a flowing garment that shifted colors with her movements. But it wasn't her appearance that froze Ryan. It was the way she looked at him, like she knew him. Ryan frowned and turned slightly, pretending to look at a stall. Maybe she was mistaking him for someone else. It happened sometimes in crowded places. He took a step away, meaning to disappear into the crowd when he heard her voice. Ryan. He froze. His real name. Not the fake ones he used in outer colonies. Not the alias stamped on his ID. His heart pounded as he turned around slowly. She was walking toward him now, her face a storm of emotions. Anger, sadness, something else he couldn't name. "You were supposed to forget me, human," she said, her voice trembling with fury. Ryan stared at her, completely lost. "I don't know you," he said, trying to stay calm. "You must be mistaking me for someone else." The woman's eyes darkened, hurt flashing through them before being quickly replaced by anger. "They erased it," she whispered bitterly. "They erased me from you." Before Ryan could say another word, she spun around and vanished into the crowded market, swallowed by the river of people. "Wait," he shouted, pushing after her. But it was too late. She was gone. Ryan stood still in the middle of the marketplace, breathing hard. Traders called out around him, oblivious to the storm that had just hit him. A few passers-by gave him strange looks, but no one paid real attention. His mind raced. Who was she? How did she know his name? And what did she mean? They erased it. Ryan shook his head. This was insane. He was sure he had never met someone like her before. He would have remembered, wouldn't he? He needed answers. He couldn't just let this go. Pulling his travel bag tighter over his shoulder, Ryan slipped deeper into the market, scanning every face. His instincts told him that this was no accident. The woman had found him for a reason. And whatever that reason was, it was tied to the strange emptiness he had been feeling for months. As he walked past a row of stalls, a merchant selling old tech gadgets called out to him. Ryan ignored him, but caught a glimpse of something at the edge of his vision, a small folded piece of fabric tucked under a metallic box. It was the same color-shifting cloth the woman had worn. Heart pounding, Ryan grabbed it. A small metal token fell out from the folds, hitting the ground with a soft clink. He picked it up. The token was smooth and round, with an unfamiliar symbol engraved in the center. Strange, yet somehow familiar. Ryan closed his fingers around it tightly. He didn't know what was happening, but one thing was clear. He wasn't leaving Virilia without finding that woman again. And somehow he felt deep in his bones that if he failed, he would lose something far more important than just a missing memory. He would lose a part of himself he hadn't even known was missing. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that everything was connected. The strange woman, the cryptic message, and the mysterious token he had found. The market, once bustling and alive, seemed empty now. All he could think about was the woman who had called him by name, and how she had said, "You were supposed to forget me, human." His heart pounded. Something about her words gnawed at him. The anger in her voice had felt too personal, too real. She knew him. But why? Where had they met? What had happened between them? Ryan could feel the pull of the unknown in his chest, like something inside him wanted to remember, but he just couldn't. The token in his pocket felt heavier with each step. The strange symbol on it seemed to shimmer, even in the dull light of the streets. What did it mean? Who had left it for him? Was it a message from the woman? A sign that she wanted him to understand? As he wandered through the city streets, his mind was a blur of questions. He needed answers. If there was one thing Ryan had learned from his years as an explorer and soldier, it was that answers were always buried, waiting to be uncovered. But sometimes, finding those answers meant digging into places he wasn't sure he wanted to go. He decided to return to the old military base where he had worked years ago. It had been shut down long before his arrival on Virilia, but there was something about it that felt like it could hold the key. The base had once been a hub of secret research, and it was where Ryan had first been stationed when he arrived on the planet for a classified mission. It had been an operation designed to monitor a newly discovered alien species. They weren't supposed to interact, but the lines had blurred. The past felt like a fog, distant and unreachable, but Ryan knew he needed to see it all again. He made his way through the outskirts of the city, toward the old base. It wasn't far, but as he walked, the silence seemed to stretch around him, deepening his unease. His feet crunched against the gravel, his thoughts consumed by the image of the woman, her angry eyes, her voice accusing him of something he couldn't even remember. When Ryan reached the base, it loomed before him like a forgotten monument. Overgrown vines clung to the cracked concrete, and the air smelled like rust and decay. It had been years since anyone had stepped foot here, and the building looked abandoned, its windows dark and lifeless. Ryan pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. Dust filled the air, and the echoes of his footsteps were the only sounds. He didn't know what he was expecting. Maybe the answers to all his questions, or at the very least, a hint of what had happened here. But as he moved through the old hallways, his fingers trailing over old control panels and broken equipment, it felt like he was intruding on a memory that wasn't his. Every room he entered seemed colder, emptier, as though it had been waiting for him to come back. His eyes were drawn to a small, locked room in the back of the building. It was different from the others. No windows, no broken panels, just a thick, metal door that had clearly been sealed for a long time. Ryan's heart beat faster. There was something about that room, something he had to see. He pulled the door open, the metal groaning in protest. Inside, the room was dark and filled with old equipment, but one thing stood out: a table in the center, its surface covered with a thick sheet of dust. At the far end of the room, a flickering screen came to life, showing an old recording. Ryan stepped closer, squinting at the screen as it played. The recording showed a younger version of himself. His uniform was pristine, and his face looked different, more confident, less haunted. He was standing in a room with other soldiers, all gathered around a figure he didn't recognize. It was a woman, an alien woman, like the one he had seen earlier. Her features were soft, her skin pale, but the most striking thing about her were her eyes. They were filled with emotion, intense and fiery, just like when she had confronted him in the market. The recording was blurry, but Ryan could make out one thing clearly. The alien woman was speaking to him. Her voice echoed in the room, a soft but urgent tone. "You promised," she said. "You promised we would never be apart." Ryan felt a chill race down his spine. This wasn't just a mission. This was personal. He was part of something bigger, something he couldn't remember. He wanted to stop the recording, to find out what had happened next, but the screen suddenly flickered and went black. He felt a surge of frustration. This wasn't enough. His fingers gripped the edge of the table. The image of her eyes flashed in his mind. The same anger, the same pain. Why couldn't he remember her? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft sound, like a voice whispering from the shadows. Ryan spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for the blaster at his side. but there was no one there. Just a faint echo, a voice he couldn't make out. "Why did you leave me?" the voice seemed to say. Ryan's breath caught. It was her. But before he could react, a door slammed shut somewhere deep within the building. He turned toward the sound, his heart racing. Someone, or something, was here. And it wasn't just a memory anymore. It was real. Ryan's heart raced. The sudden slam of the door echoed down the hall, and the silence that followed was even louder. He could feel the air grow colder, the atmosphere thick with tension. His instincts kicked in, urging him to stay calm, to be smart. He had to figure out what was happening. Ryan carefully moved toward the sound, his boots barely making a sound on the dust-covered floor. The dark hallway stretched ahead of him, its dim lighting casting long shadows against the walls. He reached for his blaster, just in case. Every step felt like it could be his last. But he wasn't alone. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, his senses alert to something, or someone, nearby. His hand tightened around the blaster as he slowly advanced. He reached a corner and peered around it, his breath shallow. Ahead of him was a narrow staircase leading down into the lower levels of the base. The faintest glow escaped from under the door at the bottom. It wasn't much, but it was enough to guide him. There was no turning back now. Ryan descended the stairs carefully, his steps echoing softly in the empty space. The door at the bottom was old, its surface scratched and chipped from years of neglect. It looked like it hadn't been opened in ages. But he had no choice. Ryan pushed the door open, and a faint scent of old machinery and dust hit him. The room was cold, a stark contrast to the warmth of the upper floors. His eyes scanned the room quickly. It was filled with old computers and equipment, some covered with sheets, others with wires hanging loose from broken panels. In the center of the room stood a large, circular table. On it, an old, dusty file lay open. Ryan approached, his mind racing. As he got closer, his stomach twisted. The file was labeled with a symbol he had seen before, the same one on the token he had found in the market. His hand trembled slightly as he reached out to touch the file, the edges frayed from years of neglect. He opened it carefully, trying not to disturb the fragile paper inside. The first page was filled with technical jargon and data that he couldn't make sense of, but the next page caught his attention. It had his name at the top, along with the words, Memory Erasure Protocol. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. The words on the page explained a lot more than he was ready for. His mind raced as he read. The document described how a human agent, Ryan himself, had been involved in an experimental procedure, one that was designed to erase memories to prevent dangerous knowledge from falling into enemy hands. It was meant to be a one-time operation, an isolated mission. But something had gone wrong. The procedure had been too successful, erasing not just his memories of the operation, but of the alien woman he had bonded with. It was a covert mission, one that had never been supposed to get out. Ryan had been part of something far bigger than he could have understood, and the woman, Kayla, had been at the center of it all. The truth hit him like a punch to the gut. Kayla had been more than just a colleague or ally. They had shared something deep, something real. But they had been forced apart, and he had been made to forget it all. The memories of her had been wiped clean from his mind, and that knowledge had been buried under layers of false memories. Ryan couldn't breathe. He had forgotten everything. But now, standing in this cold room, holding the file that held his lost memories, he felt something stirring deep inside him. It wasn't just anger or confusion, it was regret. He had been used, manipulated, and he had never even known it. He had been made to hurt her, without even understanding why. Ryan closed the file with a snap. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, the weight of everything he had just learned pressing down on him. He needed to find Kayla, needed to make things right, but that was easier said than done. She had been so angry when they met in the market, and for good reason. He had no idea what kind of life she had lived since their separation. But one thing was clear. He couldn't go on pretending nothing had happened. Kayla had been right. He had forgotten her, and she had never forgotten him. Now he had to find her and make it up to her, no matter the cost. Just as he was about to leave the room, he heard a sound, a soft scuffing noise, as if someone was trying to sneak up behind him. Ryan spun around, his blaster drawn instantly, his eyes scanning the shadows. The room was silent, the only sound his own breathing. And then he saw her. Kayla stood in the doorway, her eyes locked on him, her expression a mix of caution and something deeper, something Ryan couldn't place. She hadn't made a sound, and Ryan had no idea how long she had been standing there. Kayla, Ryan breathed, lowering his blaster slightly. Don't. She cut him off, her voice sharp. Don't try to explain. I've been waiting for you to come back, for you to remember. Ryan swallowed hard. I didn't choose to forget you. They made me forget. I didn't even know. I know, she interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. But it doesn't change the fact that you did. Ryan's heart sank. He had no words to explain, no easy way to undo the pain he had caused. He stepped toward her slowly, hoping for a chance to make things right. I'm sorry, he whispered. I wish I had known. I never meant to hurt you. Kayla's eyes softened for a moment, but she still didn't move. Her expression was unreadable. I don't know if it's enough, she said quietly, but I'm willing to listen. Ryan's heart pounded as he faced Kayla in the dimly lit room. Her eyes, once filled with anger, now held a mix of suspicion and hesitation. He had apologized, but he knew words alone wouldn't be enough to repair the damage done. He had to prove himself, not just to her, but to himself. He had forgotten her once. He couldn't do it again. Kayla remained silent, her gaze unwavering. She wasn't angry anymore, but the hurt was still there, deep beneath her calm exterior. Ryan could feel the weight of her silence pressing down on him. He had to act, to show her that he was more than just a man who had been erased from her life. I don't know where to start, Ryan said, his voice hoarse. He took a cautious step forward, trying to bridge the distance between them. But I know that I need to make things right. Kayla looked at him for a long moment, then turned her back to him. Words won't change anything, she said, her voice cool. You left me once. Why should I believe you won't leave again? The bitterness in her voice stung Ryan, but he didn't back down. He couldn't. He had been given a second chance, and he would not waste it. I can't change what happened, Ryan said, his voice steady. But I can promise you this. I'll never leave you again. I'll fight for us, no matter what it takes. Kayla turned to face him again, her eyes filled with a mixture of doubt and curiosity. And what if I don't want your help? She asked, her arms crossed. What if I don't want you to fight for me? Ryan took another step toward her, his eyes locking with hers. I don't need you to want my help. I'm doing this for you because it's the right thing to do. His voice softened. You've been alone for so long, and I've been running from my own memories. I don't want to run anymore. Kayla's gaze faltered, but she didn't say anything. Ryan could tell she was still struggling with her feelings, trying to make sense of the emotions that had been buried for so long. But there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes, something that told him she hadn't completely given up on him. I won't give up on you, Kayla, Ryan said firmly. We've both been through too much for that. For a long moment, Kayla said nothing. Then, slowly, she stepped back, lowering her arms. All right, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But if you want to fix this, you'll have to catch me first. Ryan blinked in confusion. Before he could react, Kayla turned on her heel and sprinted out of the room, her movements graceful and fast. She was gone in an instant, disappearing into the shadows of the abandoned base. Ryan stood still for a moment, his mind racing. He couldn't believe it. She was challenging him. This wasn't just about finding answers anymore. It was about proving himself to her, showing her that he could still be trusted. Without thinking, Ryan ran after her. The chase took him through the narrow hallways of the base, past rooms filled with old, forgotten technology. He followed her quickly, his heart racing, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He couldn't lose her, not now. He had to prove that he was worth her trust. Kayla's figure was just ahead, her silhouette outlined against the dim light. She moved with the speed and agility of someone who had been trained for years, her long legs carrying her effortlessly through the maze of corridors. Ryan pushed himself harder, determined to catch up. He turned a corner just in time to see Kayla dart through a door and disappear into the darkness. He didn't hesitate. Ryan burst through the door, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of her. But the room was empty. "Kayla," he called out, his voice echoing off the walls. "I'm not going to stop until I find you." A soft laugh echoed from the shadows. Ryan spun around, but Kayla was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a voice came from above him. "Do you really think you can catch me that easily, human?" Kayla's voice was playful, but there was something else in it, something deeper, something that hinted at the bond they had once shared. Ryan looked up, and there she was, perched on a ledge above him, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Why are you running?" Ryan asked, a grin spreading across his face despite the tension in the air. "What's the point of all this?" Kayla's eyes softened, but she didn't answer right away. She studied him for a moment, as if deciding whether or not to trust him. Then, slowly, she climbed down from the ledge and walked toward him. "Because, Ryan," she said quietly, "I need to know that you're willing to fight for me. That you're not just doing this because you feel guilty. I need to know that you care about me, not just as someone from your past, but as someone who matters." Ryan felt a lump form in his throat. Her words hit harder than he expected, and for a moment he didn't know how to respond. But then he looked into her eyes and knew what he had to say. "I care about you, Kayla, more than anything," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I'm not running anymore. I'm here to stay." Kayla studied him for a moment longer, then finally nodded. "All right, human. Let's see if you really mean it." And with that, she turned and started walking away. But this time, Ryan didn't hesitate. He followed her, knowing that the real journey was just beginning. Ryan followed Kayla through the winding corridors of the abandoned base, his footsteps heavy on the dusty floor. The chase had ended, but something had shifted between them. There was no longer a need for him to prove himself to her. Kayla had given him a chance to show her that he was committed to fixing what had been broken. And now, as they walked side by side, he knew that he had to do more than just speak words. He had to show her with his actions that he was not the same man who had forgotten her. Kayla moved silently beside him, her eyes distant as she seemed to be lost in her own thoughts. Ryan knew she was still hurting. The way she had run from him earlier was a reminder that the wounds they both carried hadn't healed, but he felt a spark of hope that he hadn't felt before. They had found each other again, and that meant something. Ryan couldn't help but glance at her, his eyes following the graceful movements of her body as she walked. Her pale blue skin, her soft features, everything about her had captivated him from the first moment he laid eyes on her. But it wasn't just her beauty that drew him in. It was the bond they had shared in the past, a connection he had forgotten, but was now beginning to feel again. The token he had found in the market felt heavy in his pocket, its symbol still a mystery. It was as if the token itself was calling to him, urging him to remember, to unlock the parts of his past that had been erased. It wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a key to something deeper, something important. They'd reached the back of the base, where the walls were darker and the air colder. Kayla stopped in front of an old door that looked like it had been sealed for years. She turned to face Ryan, her expression unreadable. "We're here," Kayla said quietly. Her voice, which had been sharp and guarded earlier, was softer now. This is where it all started. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. The tension between them was palpable, but there was also a strange calmness in the air. He stepped forward, his hand reaching for the door, but Kayla held up a hand to stop him. "I know you're ready to understand," she said, her voice firm. "But you need to know something first. What happened here wasn't just about us. It was about something much bigger. Ryan looked at her, his mind racing. What do you mean? What's behind this door? Kayla hesitated before speaking again, her eyes dark with memories. This is where we were kept, where we were tested, where they decided what we would become. The bond we shared was no accident. It was planned. We were made to be together, but not for the reasons we thought. Ryan's breath caught in his chest. He had always known there were things about his past that were hidden from him, but hearing Kayla speak made it feel so real. They had been part of something much darker than he had ever imagined. Kayla's gaze softened, but only for a moment. She turned her back to Ryan and began to slowly push the heavy door open. It creaked loudly as it moved, revealing a small, dimly lit room beyond. Inside, old technology sat dormant, covered in layers of dust. But there was something else, a feeling of weight in the air, as if the room held memories too painful to remember. Ryan stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. He had no idea what he was looking for, but something told him that everything he needed to know was right in front of him. Here, Kayla said, gesturing to a corner of the room. This is where they erased our memories. The machine we used, well, it didn't just erase. It rewrote. It created false memories, made us forget what was real. Ryan approached the machine she was pointing to. It was an old device, its wires frayed and its surface covered in grime. He reached out to touch it, but stopped just short, as if the machine itself held a warning. You were part of a project, Kayla continued, her voice steady. They didn't just want to erase memories. They wanted control. They wanted us to forget who we really were, who we really loved. They thought if they could separate us, they could break the bond and prevent us from being a threat. Ryan's mind was spinning. It was starting to make sense. Kayla, the woman from his dreams, the one who had always haunted his thoughts. She had been more than just an ally. She had been the person he was supposed to protect, the person he had been forced to forget. And now, Ryan asked, his voice trembling slightly, what happens now? Is it possible to undo all of this? Kayla looked at him for a long moment, and for the first time since their reunion, Ryan saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. I don't know, she said quietly, but we have to try. Ryan felt a weight lift off his shoulders. For the first time since arriving on Virelia, he felt like he wasn't alone in this fight. Kayla was by his side, and they both had a chance to undo the damage that had been done to them. We will fix this, Ryan said, his voice filled with resolve. Together. Kayla nodded, her expression softening. We will, she said, her voice filled with the same quiet determination. As they stood together in the darkened room, the silence around them seemed to fade away. The only sound was the soft hum of the old machine, as if it too was waiting for them to unlock its secrets. Ryan knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but with Kayla by his side, he believed they could uncover the truth and reclaim their past. They were no longer just two lost souls wandering through a galaxy of forgotten memories. They were a team, ready to face whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, Ryan felt like he was finally home. The room felt heavy with the weight of unspoken words. Ryan and Kayla stood together, facing the old machine that had stolen their memories. The answers they had uncovered so far only raised more questions, but they knew they had to keep moving forward. There was no turning back now. Ryan took a deep breath, his mind focused on the task ahead. We need to find out who was behind all this, he said quietly. We need to know who decided to erase us, who made the choice to tear us apart. Kayla nodded, her eyes filled with determination. I've spent years searching for the truth, but it's always been just out of reach. Now we have a chance to bring everything to light. They had uncovered fragments of the truth, but the deeper secrets were still hidden. The machine had been a tool for controlling memories, a weapon designed to ensure that certain people, like Ryan and Kayla, would never remember their past, their bond, or the power they had together. But as Ryan and Kayla had discovered, The forces behind the machine weren't just faceless officials. The betrayal ran deeper. It was personal. Ryan looked at Kayla, his heart heavy with a sense of urgency. We can't do this alone. We need allies, people who still believe in what we once fought for. Kayla's gaze flickered to the darkened hallways of the old base, her thoughts 1,000 miles away. I know someone, she said softly, almost as if she were talking to herself. Someone who might be able to help. Ryan's interest was piqued. Who? Kayla turned to him, her expression unreadable. My old commander. He's been silent for years, but he was one of the few who knew about the project. If we can find him, he might have the answers we need. Ryan nodded, understanding the importance of what she was suggesting. If they could track down her commander, they might finally uncover the truth. But the journey wouldn't be easy. They had no idea where he was, or if he would even be willing to help them after everything that had happened. Let's do it, Ryan said, his voice firm. We have to take that chance. Later that evening, the two of them set off, leaving the crumbling base behind. They didn't have much, just the clothes on their backs and a few supplies. But that didn't matter. What they were chasing was far more important than anything physical. They were chasing the truth. Kayla led the way, her steps quick and confident, though Ryan could see the strain in her shoulders. She had been carrying the weight of their shared past for so long, and now, as they walked side by side, it felt like they were both trying to lighten that load. They traveled for hours, moving through dense forests and over rocky terrain. Kayla's commander was located on a remote outpost far from the city, hidden away to avoid being tracked. They couldn't risk using any technology to pinpoint his location. Everything was too dangerous. As the night deepened, they found shelter in an abandoned building, a small cabin tucked away near the edge of a forest. The roof creaked with the wind, and the wooden walls groaned in the chill, but it was safe for now. Ryan sat by the window, watching the stars in the sky, his mind racing with everything they had learned. He knew they couldn't afford to wait too long. Every moment that passed brought them closer to the forces who wanted to silence them, and Ryan could feel their presence closing in. Kayla, on the other hand, seemed lost in thought. She hadn't said much since they arrived, and Ryan could tell she was wrestling with her emotions. The weight of their past, the betrayal, the memories she had lost. It was a lot for anyone to carry. He stood and walked over to her, sitting down beside her on the worn wooden floor. Kayla, he said softly, I know this isn't easy for you. I'm sorry for everything. Kayla turned to him, her eyes searching his face. I don't know what I expected when I found you again, she said, her voice low. But it's not just about the past. It's about what we do now, what we choose to do moving forward. Ryan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. I'm not asking you to forget what happened, Kayla, but we have a chance to make things right, to expose the truth, to show everyone what they did to us. We can't let them win. For a long moment, Kayla said nothing. Then, slowly, she nodded. You're right. We can't let them win. The conversation was quiet after that, but there was a sense of resolution in the air. They had come so far, and there was no turning back now. They had a plan, and they were going to see it through, no matter the cost. The next morning, they set off once again, their journey taking them deeper into unknown territory. The road to the commander's outpost was long and dangerous, but they were determined to find him. They moved quickly, relying on Kayla's knowledge of the terrain to guide them. As they walked, Ryan couldn't help but feel the growing tension in the air. The further they went, the more he could sense the looming threat. Someone, or something, was watching them. They had to be careful. After hours of walking, they reached a small hilltop overlooking a vast valley. In the distance, they could just make out the outline of a heavily fortified building. It was the commander's outpost, a place that had been hidden for years, and yet now, it seemed to be their only hope. That's it, Kayla said, her voice barely a whisper. That's where we'll find the answers. Ryan nodded, his resolve strengthening. Then let's go. And together, they moved forward, their past still a shadow in the distance, but their future now within reach. The journey to the outpost had been long, and every step had brought Ryan and Kayla closer to answers they had been searching for. But as they approached the fortified building in the distance, a sense of unease crept into Ryan's mind. This was it, the place where their past was hidden. The place where the final pieces of their story would fall into place. They moved quietly through the dense woods, careful not to make any noise. The outpost was surrounded by high walls, and security seemed tight. But Kayla had been here before. She knew the layout, and she knew how to get in without drawing attention. Ryan followed her through the trees, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of movement. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was the turning point, the moment when everything they had learned would either make sense, or they would be left with more questions than ever. Kayla stopped at the edge of the trees, looking at the outpost with a mixture of determination and apprehension. "We're almost there," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The commander should be inside. He's the one who can explain everything." Ryan nodded, his heart racing. They had come so far, and now it all came down to this. They needed answers, and the commander held the key. Kayla motioned for Ryan to follow, and they crept closer to the walls. The guards patrolled in a predictable pattern, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. Kayla had a plan, and Ryan trusted her. He knew that their success depended on their ability to remain unseen. As they reached a narrow gap between the walls, Kayla signaled for Ryan to stop. She crouched down, carefully moving aside a loose piece of metal that covered a small entrance. It was just wide enough for them to squeeze through. Ryan followed Kayla into the shadows, his breath steady but his mind racing. He could feel the weight of their mission, the responsibility to uncover the truth about what had happened to them. And yet, despite the danger, there was a strange sense of calm. Kayla was with him. They were in this together. They moved through the narrow passage, their footsteps muffled against the cold concrete floor. The inside of the outpost was dark and quiet, the hum of machinery the only sound breaking the silence. Kayla led the way, her movements precise and confident. After what felt like hours, they reached a heavy metal door at the end of a long corridor. Kayla paused, looking at Ryan one last time before she carefully inserted a small device into the door's control panel. The door clicked open, and Kayla pushed it just wide enough for them to slip inside. Inside, the room was dimly lit, with rows of monitors displaying security footage and data logs. The air smelled musty, as if the building hadn't been used in years. But what caught Ryan's attention wasn't the room. It was the man standing at the far end, his back to them. The commander. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. This was the man who held the answers to everything, who knew the truth about their past, about the memory erasure, and about the betrayal that had torn them apart. "Commander." Kayla's voice was steady, but Ryan could hear the edge of emotion in it. "It's time to end this." The commander turned slowly, his face a mixture of surprise and something else. Regret, perhaps. He studied Kayla for a long moment, then glanced at Ryan. The recognition in his eyes was unmistakable. "I never thought I'd see you again," the commander said, his voice soft but filled with years of buried pain. "After everything that happened, I thought you were lost to me." Ryan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We're not lost. We've come for answers. For the truth." The commander nodded slowly, his face weary. He motioned for them to sit, and they gathered around the table in the center of the room. "Everything you've been told," he began, "was a lie. The memory erasure, the separation, it was all part of a bigger plan. A plan to prevent the human and alien alliances from becoming too powerful." Ryan's mind raced. "You were part of this plan?" he asked, his voice tight with disbelief. The commander's eyes softened. "I didn't have a choice. I was ordered to keep you both apart. I thought it was for the greater good, to protect both humans and aliens from the dangers of too much power. But I was wrong." Kayla's gaze never left the commander. You erased our memories. You made us forget everything. You took away everything we had. The commander's face twisted with guilt. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to erase your memories. But I had orders, and I followed them. I thought it was the only way to keep things from getting out of control. Ryan clenched his fists, fighting the anger that rose inside him. And now, what happens now? The commander's voice was heavy with regret. Now, we expose the truth. We show everyone what happened, what was done to you both. We can't undo the past, but we can make sure it never happens again. Kayla's eyes narrowed. And what about the ones who made these decisions? The ones who ordered the memory erasure? The commander hesitated. They're still out there, but they won't be able to hide forever. We have the evidence. It's time for them to face the consequences of what they've done. Ryan and Kayla exchanged a look. They had come here for answers, and now they had them. But the fight was far from over. The people who had caused all this pain were still out there, still in power. And Ryan knew that it was up to him, Kayla, and anyone willing to stand with them to bring them down. I'm in, Ryan said, his voice resolute. Let's make sure the truth gets out. Kayla nodded. It's time to make them pay for what they've done. Together, they stood, ready to take on whatever came next. The truth was finally within their reach, and nothing would stop them from exposing it.